Shana Tova. Yatev. As many of you know, I grew up in the south of France, in a mountainous area, a rural area, and there were very few people. You could drive 45 minutes in every direction, and maybe there were 20,000 people in the whole area. And weather was always predictable. It snowed once every 7 years, exactly. And summers were hot, but with a dry heat. And there were rains in the winters, in the fall, and late summer storms. But over the past years, the weather patterns have changed dramatically. It now snows many times in one winter. It used to only snow once every 7 years. And this year, the area had such unprecedented drought. The rivers ran so low that there were a lot of communities that didn't have any water to drink any longer. And they warned of fires in the summer. And as I've heard, they had devastating fires. And the heat has in so many places worldwide reached record levels. Unseen heat indexes, as in other parts of the Mediterranean, where people have been living essentially the same for centuries, and very few people have air conditioning. I also lived in England, as I've shared before, for 5 years. And England was always a place of very mild weather and rolling hills, and nothing like France or Israel, where I grew up with. But in the past few years, they also smashed a few heat records. And this summer, we heard about the seas superheating at a rate unseen before. In India, where I also lived when I was a teenager for just 1 year in India, I remember even back then, the temperatures were so hot with the pollution, you couldn't go outside for long periods of the day. It was deadly. And now they've reached temperatures they've never reached before, and records for entire months that are hotter than it's ever been before. And so now what they're talking about is what they call wet bulb temperature. Hard to explain, but it's a way to measure temperature which includes humidity and the dry heat, all of it together. And so, for example, 90 degrees of wet bulb temperature is equal to a heat index of 130. And so they say that that's the temperature when human beings stop to be able to function and their organs start to shut down. And there are large parts of the world, India, Pakistan, Mexico, Australia, Iraq, where they're hitting those temperatures more and more often. And 40% of the world lives in these places where those wet bulb temperatures are being hit. So to compare the 1995 heat wave in Chicago, right, which caused 739 people to die, that had a wet bulb temperature of 85, which was equivalent to about 110 in humidity. And so on Rosh Hashanah, we contemplate judgment, but we also think about our world and the creation of the world. Right? We sing this after we blow the shofar, Hayom Harat Olam, today the world was created. And so it's a way of teaching by saying on the 1st of Tishrei that this is the birthday of the world, so to speak. It's a way of saying that our human calendar, how we mark time, how we mark Jewish time, our Jewish calendar, and that our very presence in the world as Jews, as human beings, is linked to the earth where we were meant to live and where we live. And so in the book of Genesis, right, it makes it clear what that relationship is supposed to look like. It's the very beginning of our most sacred scripture is the Torah. We're supposed to be partners with God in the act of creating. Human beings were supposed to be the custodians of the beautiful garden where we live. And it says in the Torah, God settled the first humans, Adam and Eve, to till and to tend the divine garden, to till and tend. And it was supposed to be a relationship that was mutually beneficial. As the Italian commentator Sforno, he says on the verse, from his medieval point of view. He says, well, when it says God gave humans the fruit of the garden, he says that was to ensure that human beings' natural juices would not dry up, and that the fruit of the trees would rehydrate human beings and replenish the loss of moisture through evaporation on the skin in the heat of the sun. Sounds prescient. And the Or HaChaim, a Moroccan commentator, so he says, human beings, we were meant to till and tend the garden also for spiritual reasons, so that we could see that our well-being is directly connected to the well-being and the state of the garden. And when you see it, you understand it so much more clearly. But also the garden was to teach us how to live. And he says, just as in a garden one has to labor to prepare the garden, to till and to plant and to irrigate it to grow our physical food, that also is supposed to teach us how it works as spiritual food. It's the same. Spiritual food also has to be carefully prepared, and the earth of the soul has to be tilled, and good habits have to be planted and over many years watered and irrigated. All the things that we need to live in a deeper way, and then it has to be nurtured before it's harvested. And so for much of human history, we understood all these connections. It was just naturally part of our lives, this mutually beneficial relationship. And we saw how our well-being was connected, dependent on the environment. And we understood the parallels between our outer and our inner lives. And now we live in a world that's so out of sync. We live completely far from nature. We're disconnected from all the cycles and the growth. And it's not surprising that we've also become impatient and unbalanced in our inner lives, in our spiritual lives. We want our spiritual food to be just like our regular food. Fast and easy, harvested immediately, no work required on our part. So we were supposed to take care of the garden. We were supposed to be partners in creation. But for the past few centuries, we've stopped doing our part in all that work. And now we're finally beginning to wake up and to see that taking care of our planet is not only something we hear about in the news, but it's also a spiritual and religious obligation. It's one of the most ancient mitzvahs we forgot about. We have to take it seriously again. You can say to tend and care for the environment is the 11th commandment of our time. So the words in the Torah, to till and to tend, in the Hebrew are la'avod ve'lishmor, which literally means to work and to guard. These are familiar Torah words to us. We're commanded to work for the divine in service of humanity in the second paragraph of the Shema, to make the world a better place. But not on Shabbat. On Shabbat, we're called to do no avodah, no work. But we're also called to, this is where we find it the most, to guard, the same word, guard Shabbat. This is the word that's used for observing Shabbat. And so that same alert and powerful awareness the religious Jews bring to guarding Shabbat, that's the kind of work and alertness and focus that we should be spending for caring for our planet. So in the second paragraph of the Shema, it tells us, well, this is what's going to happen. Right? Written 3,500 years ago, brought into the world 3,500 years ago. If we do serve and do everything we're supposed to, the rains will come at their time, and the harvest will be plentiful. Quote, I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late, and you shall gather in your new grain and wine and oil. And I will also provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and thus shall you eat your fill. End of quote. But then it tells us what will happen if we don't love and serve in that way. Quote, for the Lord's anger will flare against you, and he or she will shut up the skies, so there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will soon perish from the good land that the Lord is assigning to you. A little stark. But the paragraph has really become a lot more real to us over the past few years. It's become a lot more real. And so Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who's the founder of the Renewal Movement, he has a modern translation of the second paragraph of the Shema, which used to be the paragraph that was pushed aside, but maybe is taking on more relevance with this crisis. So here are how he translates it. How good it will be when you really listen and hear my directions, which I give you today, for loving Yah, who is your God, and to act godly with feeling and inspiration. And then your earthly needs will be met at the right time, appropriate to the season. You will reap what you planted for your delight and health. Also your animals will have ample feed. All of you will eat and be content. Be careful, watch out. Don't let your cravings delude you. Don't become alienated. Don't let your cravings become your gods. Don't debase yourself to them, because the God sense within you will become distorted. Heaven will be shut to you. Grace will not descend. Earth will not yield her produce. Your rushing will destroy you, and earth will not be able to recover her good balance in which God's gifts manifest. May these values of mine reside in your feelings and aspirations, marking what you produce, guiding what you perceive. Teach them to your children so that they are instructed how to make their homes sacred and how they deal with traffic, even when you are depressed and when you are elated. Mark your entrances and your exits with them so you will be more aware. Then you and your children and their children will live out on earth that divine promise given to your ancestors, to live heavenly days right here on this earth. And so part of God's directions were to tend and to till and to watch over, and that through it we could all reap a wonderful life. And the founder of Hasidism, the Baal Shem Tov, 250 years ago, taught this even more pointedly. And what he says is, if we're in harmony with our world, then the rain comes at the right time, whatever time it comes, because we're ready, we've got the wisdom. We're attuned to the cycles of the earth and we know what to do. However, if we're not in harmony with the one, then the rain will not come in the right time, whatever time it comes, and everything is out of kilter. And so in the story of Genesis, the nature of the relationship is just very specific. And it's not just about tending and tilling, but it's more. Adam is given dominion over the earth. That's right, God says, let us make humankind in our image, after our likeness. They shall rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the cattle, the whole earth, and all the creeping things that creep on earth. What does it mean? So the commentators of the Torah, thinking about this concept of dominion through millennia, this is what they say. The human beings were given a special responsibility because human beings have that power of discernment, to comprehend, to build. And as Rashi, the French medieval commentator who wrote the definitive commentary on the Torah says, he says, human beings have consciousness. We're a spark of God, and that makes us a higher form of life. But it's complicated. He says, he points out the Hebrew word for dominion is essentially the same word for going down. So dominion is something that can also cause us to descend. And he quotes the Midrash, if human beings are worthy, they dominate over the beasts and cattle, but if they're not worthy, they sink lower than them, and the beasts will rule over them. Because that dominion was both a charge and a challenge. And 2 verses later, God blesses the first humans, and God says to them, be fertile and increase, and conquer the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep on earth. And so here, Seforno, the Italian commentator, says regarding conquering the earth. So this is not a directive to conquer the earth with muscular power, but to subdue it with man's intellect. And the means, he says, the means of man is to use his intelligence to prevent predators from invading his habitats, demonstrating the fact that man is superior and that he can outwit the beasts. And there was a real need for our ancestors, right, to subdue nature and to secure themselves from predators. That was actually their daily life. We can say that human beings have done a very good job at this, right? Over the recent centuries, we've done a good job of preventing predators from invading our cities, except for during COVID, maybe. And we've reached a point where we have a know-how to dominate and master beyond what any of our forebears would have been able to imagine. And perhaps you can say at this age, our relationship with nature is different and shifted. We dominated nature, and thought that was all it was about, this dominating and do whatever we want, conquering. And maybe this made sense when human beings were still tending and tilling and caring and had to defend themselves from predators and had to learn to use their minds and consciousness to keep moving forward and develop, and when we were unable to impact the whole planet. Now we've done a superb job of domineering and mastering. We've forgotten how to tend and care for the planet. So our garden is a mess. In our ignorance and arrogance, we thought it was only about dominating and using all of our resources to grow and grow and grow for human development. And now we know better. Even 40 years ago, we knew our domination of the planet was causing holes in the ozone, and we had to shift some behaviors. And now we know it's a lot more serious than we realized. We've unbalanced the entire garden and planet to the extent that we're no longer able to, as Forno, speaking from his medieval scientific point of view, said, to rehydrate ourselves, literally. We're no longer able to receive from the bounty. We're no longer able to sustain our lives, and maybe our race. We're beginning to see how intimately linked are our well-being to the well-being of the garden. We're beginning to see that we need to use that same consciousness and that intellect to tend and care for the garden in new ways, or the rains really will not come, and the ground will not yield its produce, and will soon perish from the land, the only land we all have, this beautiful world. If we don't make the major changes to the way we treat it all, and the way we live our lives, we may be thrown out of the good land of the planet Earth that we've been given to be its stewards, to tend and care for all life in this world. And so it's always an evolving process. We like to concretize everything. Maybe we're in a new phase. And with the skies really shutting and the fish of the sea already dying, there are many people around the globe who are already working hard to do this work of tending to our garden in new, exciting ways that all of us can really support and truly rally around. And in Israel alone, there are 760 eco-startups, right? A nation that's always had such a difficult climate and a shortage of natural resources. Israel's always been forced to innovate. And so for so many decades, they've had solar receptors on roofs to be able to heat the water. Over 90% of homes in Israel have it. Drip irrigation to water the orchards and gardens. And just this summer, our member Larry Stark sent me a video about an Israeli company that can 3D print steaks from living cells and 3D print any kind of fish that you want. You can order that kind of fish and it comes. And they can print very fast tons of the food, not just one steak, but tons of it. And almost like the food distributors in sci-fi shows like Star Trek. There's this other amazing environmental startup called Createrra, and they're creating decarbonized construction materials. There's no need for cement. There's no kiln that has to heat it up. It's a completely new kind of construction material that we'll be building our cities in the future, God willing. Another one, Helios, found a way to produce steel with zero emissions. Usually for every ton of steel, there's 2 tons of emission of CO2. And then there's Moment Tech. This is a startup that can use multiple satellites around the world and find out at any one time, any place around the globe, at any moment, what are the emissions coming from that factory or city or place, and convey that to people. Maybe best named startup, the Zohar Clean Tech. And they created a box that goes into people's homes, and there you can put all your ordinary trash, all the plastic, everything, and it converts that trash into energy, and what comes out is slag, right? Kind of matter that can be used for building also, be reused. And that eliminates the use of garbage trucks and landfills and all of that. HydroX, a company that can store hydrogen safely for the upcoming hydrogen revolution. Deika, which uses wood waste to build beautiful wood products. Naki, this is a really wild one, but they have robots that can clean the hulls of ships while the ships are sailing and impact millions of boats. They don't have to stop to have their hulls cleaned periodically, and the slime doesn't build up on the hulls. And there are so many others. Luminescent, that produces the world's first isothermal heat engine using waste heat. Finally, QD Sol, the startup that's producing green hydrogen, and really the future on a very large scale of the future green environmental hydrogen production. Right, so 760 companies in Israel alone, green tech, environmental, clean manufacturing, alternative food, clean energy, water infrastructure, green construction and building. Because we're all praying that we learn how to tend and till our garden in time. And that's not always been the case. Right, later in the book of Genesis, humanity, now living outside of the garden, presents us with this story of when evil and violence became so bad in our world that God decided to destroy everything. Quote, right, Adonai saw how great was human wickedness on earth and how every plan devised by the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. And Adonai regretted having made humankind on earth. With a sorrowful heart, Adonai said, I will blot out from the earth humankind whom I created, humans together with beasts, creeping things, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. End of quote. But then we know the story. He tells Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. I've decided to put an end to all flesh, for earth is filled with lawlessness. Because of them, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark. And so Noah makes the ark, and the rain begins to fall, and the animals join him in the ark, and all of existence is blotted out. And finally the rains stop, and the water recedes. Noah opens the window and lets out the dove, and the dove comes back. And God speaks to Noah and tells him to come out, because finally it's time to repopulate the world and let it be the beautiful, vibrant world. And so Noah came out with all the animals, and he makes an altar in gratitude. Quote, and Adonai smelt a pleasing odor, and Adonai resolved, never again will I doom the earth because of humankind, since the devisings of the human mind are evil from youth, nor will I ever again destroy every living being as I have done. So long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Then God further says, this is the sign that I set the covenant between me and you and every living creature with you for all ages to come. I have set my bow, my rainbow in the clouds. And when I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between you and every living creature among all flesh, so that the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. End of quote. But maybe the situation, however we want to look at this story, has changed. And maybe the rules are now different. And maybe with the ability that we now have to destroy the planet, the mastery and dominion that we have achieved in the way we now live, that covenant that we call the covenant of the rainbow is no longer valid. And we're no longer helpless human beings. And that covenant of Noah not to destroy the earth with that God makes is no longer valid. And then we can lose that fragile harmony that's so beautifully put here. Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. Because the promise that all of that will cease is very real and under threat today. And therefore it's up to us at this critical juncture to think of the new year, Rosh Hashanah, in a different way than we have before. Because every year, yes, we renew ourselves. We also have to renew the earth. And it was never in doubt that it was all of our responsibility. We were given dominion, we were given mastery. We were given human consciousness and the ability to discern and to build so we could tend the planet wisely. And we were given the task of working the earth and tilling it, of tending and caring for God's garden. We've forgotten how to do that. We've forgotten how to tend and till during these past centuries. And now we're in that danger of not being able to renew the earth so that we can live upon it. And so we're in a different era. We've mastered, we've dominated, we've done that. We have to learn how to become tenders and tillers again. In new ways, the green tech, clean construction and clean energy, alternative food. It's our responsibility as the gardeners of our planet. We have to think about everything in a different way, with fresh eyes. to use all the ways we already know about, to take care of the planet, recycling and composting, and to invest in those Israeli startups or American startups, wherever, but putting our resources into areas that will push humanity forward and are good for the environment and the economy. We have to remember that this is a religious and spiritual obligation to take care of our planet. And it's not an obligation that many of us grew up thinking about. So it still feels new and different and maybe a little uncomfortable. But the world evolves, and our inner religious life evolves, and humanity evolves. And our challenge is to evolve with it for the well-being of all of those who came and will come after us. Because we have to believe that if we do what we must, our earth will renew itself, and we will find ways to make it happen, and we will understand and we'll discern the garden better than ever before. And for the sake of our world, for the sake of our children, for the sake of our grandchildren, and the world they will inherit, and that they will probably tend and till the earth in ways we can't even imagine, and find a new balance and harmony with nature. And humanity will continue to live and flourish on this good earth that the Lord has given us. Good Yantav, Chag Sameach.